Welcome to the TEFL Training Institute podcast, the bite-sized TEFL podcast for teachers, trainers, and managers.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone.
So last week my friend Jake and I were chatting over a beer, and Jake was talking about his daughter who's, how old is she?
2.5.
2.5, yeah, and talking about her listening skills. And he told me this interesting story.
What she does is, every time I say something, she says, like say she sees a horse and she'll say, "Daddy, what's that?" And I'll say, "It's a horse." And she'll say, "What's the horse doing?" She'll be walking down the street, she'll see a tree, and I say, "Daddy, what's that?" And I say, "It's a tree." She says, "What's the tree doing?" So it's always the same. What's the something doing? So I'm walking down the street in my complex, car comes up behind us driving the wrong way and starts beeping at us. And I turn around and go, "Asshole," and she turns around and says, "Daddy, what's the asshole doing?"
So I thought that was a really cool example of how quickly kids, when they're learning their first language, even at 2.5, her listening skills are so developed that she can hear a word and then pick up on it, and immediately she knows it's a noun and she starts asking questions about it and using it.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about teaching listening.
And we've got 3 questions. The first question is,
Why is it important to teach listening? Number 2,
how can we run a listening activity in a class? And finally,
how can we integrate listening into other language skills throughout the lesson? Okay, so yeah, of course, listening is really important, and other 3 language skills are equally important. But
well, are they equally important?
Okay, so
I was reading something online recently, and it was based on research about how much we use the different skills. So Tracy, can you guess which skills do we use the most and which skills do we use the least?
Let me guess the least. Least might be writing.
Writing's the least. Can you guess which one we use the most?
I would say speaking or listening.
So listening. So they reckon that 40 to 50% of the time we're listening, 25 to 30% of the time we're speaking, which is really interesting because if you look at our classes, what percentage of our classes do we do listening activities?
Not very much.
Right, I would say like maybe 5% of the time. What percentage of our classes do we do speaking activities?
Probably, quite a lot.
Yeah, probably 60, 70%, right? Almost our English classes are the wrong way round, right?
We always tell the teachers, make sure you have at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the class and ask your students to practice what they learned today. But really, they will probably need to practice listening as well.
Yeah. So I found this cool Stephen Krashen video on YouTube, and he talks about how important listening is.
There are some things we all do the same. We all digest food the same. First you put it in your mouth, then you chew it up, then it goes down your throat, then into your stomach. That's how it's done everywhere. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input.
So I think, like you said, we always focus on produce instead of receiving the really important information for the second language acquisition.
So you can split listening up into 2 different kinds, right? What are the 2 different modes of listening?
So the multiple modes include 2 major aspects. One is the interpersonal mode. The other one is interpretive mode. Okay. So, for example, when we are talking to each other.
Like now,
yeah. And you ask me questions, I have to respond. I'm in a participative role. I'm not just listening and try to find out the information. I need to give you a response. So I'm also talking and listening at the same time.
Cool. Yeah. So what you say then influences what you hear.
Yeah. So like we finished the podcast and we play the podcast.
So if you're listening to this now, it's interpretive.
Yes.
Okay.
Interpretive.
So I guess in classes we need to do both.
Exactly. When you're listening, it's not just about specific words and to understand the meaning. That's why listening is quite challenging because you have to listen to the reduced language forms. For example, I want to go, I'm gonna, or wait a sec. So there are so many different forms that you have to understand.
Oh, I see. So like one word, like want to, but you also have to understand wanna and understand they have the same meaning.
Yeah, I think maybe this is also related to phonology. I mean, the different accents. Speaking, maybe you can choose the particular way how you speak. You can choose the accent you feel more comfortable. But listening, you can't just choose one accent you feel more comfortable with. So I think that's why listening is so difficult.
Yeah.
So listening is so important, right? But why don't teachers teach more listening in the class?
So I think it's because if you do a listening activity, it's like the learning is almost invisible. Whereas if you do a speaking activity, like, oh yeah, I got the students talking, everyone was really active, like they're wandering down, doing these things. But if you do listening activities, most of the time the students are, from looking at it, you can't really see the difference between it being silent and being passive. But there is actually a huge difference there. So Trace, what's the main way that teachers should run listening activities?
I want to talk about the top-down processing. So we set up context to raise the students' interest and their curiosity about the topic. And
So you basically introduce the topic first, right?
yeah, for example, you can show them the picture, 2 or 3 people are talking, and you ask them to guess where they are, what they're talking about.
Yeah, or it could be something like you show them a photo of a hotel front desk, and you say, if you heard a conversation here, what would they be talking about? So it might be checking in, might be checking out, might be complaining, and you're getting them to predict those things. If you're teaching kids, a lot of listening activities for kids are videos or cartoons, maybe just showing the first few seconds of the cartoon and then pausing it and saying, what do you think is going to happen? I know for some course books, they have flashcards that go with the story in the listening, and just saying, okay, here's the 6 flashcards for the story. Can you guess the order that the flashcards go in? So the students have to, again, predict what's going to happen. But the great thing about that is they don't need any language. So if you've got really, really young learners, the students can talk about it in their L1, but they're still predicting the content.
Yeah.
So that's prediction, which is the first step. And then?
The first time and you play the listening, you want them to listen for the gist, or so we can call global comprehension.
Wow. Is there a way of saying that that's easier to understand?
Yeah, just listening for the general information. The reason why I think it's so important, so you don't want them to listen like bit by bit, because in reality, you cannot pause.
Right. Sometimes you see teachers doing this. So play a listening and they pause after every sentence. And you just think, well, that doesn't help anyone. You go out into the real world. You can't pause people when they're speaking to you, right? Like you need to be able to develop the skill of listening to a big chunk and understanding what on earth is going on.
Yeah.
So what's an example of a gist question that you might ask the first time you play a listening?
What is the relationship between these 2 people?
Yeah.
True or false questions. Are they ordering food in a restaurant, or are they shopping in a shopping mall? Or put the event in order.
You can also, for the gist, just ask them, because you got them to predict first, right? You can just say, was your guess right?
Yeah.
You can kind of do that for just about any listening, can't you?
Yeah. And I really like your favorite.
Oh, Penny-er.
She said a listening purpose should be provided in the definition of a preset task. The purpose enables the listener to listen selectively for significant information.
So what does that mean?
I've seen a lot of teachers that just play the listening again.
Oh yeah, like 5 times or something.
Yeah, didn't give them any questions or any focus when they're listening. And then after play the listening and say, oh, tell me which word means this, and tell me what is people talking about.
Oh, so always ask the question before the listening, so that people are focused on something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's the next step, Tracy?
The next step is listening for details.
Okay.
You would like to focus on maybe some linguistic aspects like a grammar or forms or structures.
Right, so pick out the new words or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So what kind of questions would you ask students?
I really like the questions which challenge the students more. Like, can you give me another example for X, or how do you say Y in another way?
Yeah.
So in what other situations would you use X and Y to express
Right.
your ideas?
Something I like to do sometimes is to split the class into 2 or 3, and you can differentiate and say, oh, you guys, can you write down the questions that this person asked? And you 3, can you write down some of the words the other person used to say sorry? And you can mark down the intonation. So you can give different students different listening activities. And then afterwards, you can do a mingle where the people share their answers.
Cool, that's a nice one.
So you've predicted, you've listened for gist, you've listened for specific information. What's next?
I'm so happy you asked me the last step, because usually we finish listening for details and we just move on. But I think really important to do some post-listening activity.
Right.
You can refer it to the student's personal experience and try to use the information or the language they learned from the listening listening. Use it as a springboard for production.
So there's some sort of discussion or something after you've done the listening.
Yeah, like have you experienced before, and
Also,
what is it like
someone...
in your city, in your country? If you can bring in some like culture or...
I see. So if it's someone complaining at a hotel, you can go, oh, is this how people in China would complain at a hotel? Or have you ever complained in a hotel? Was it like this?
Okay, now let's move on to the next one. How can we integrate listening into other language skills?
So you remember at the beginning I asked you about like what percentage of the time we do listening activities? And we said it was really low. The speaking activities is really high. So this week, instead of quoting Penny Ur all the time, because you did it, I'm going to quote Stephen Krashen again. Here's what he says about speaking and listening.
Let me put in a brief commercial message for speaking. I'm not opposed to speaking. I think when students speak, it's fine. But what counts in speaking is not what you say, but what the other person says to you. In other words, when you get involved in conversation, what counts is the input that you can stimulate from other people.
It's almost like he's saying that speaking activities are really listening activities in disguise. Every time that we do a speaking activity in class, he's saying that the main benefit for the students isn't the speaking, it's actually the listening, that the listening practice they get from speaking to their partner in interpersonal mode of listening. I saw this on a diploma recently. It was 4 groups. Each group had to write a 1-minute commercial, like an advertisement, for a product, and then come to the front of the class and present. On the face of it, it sounds okay. What actually happened, if you've got 4 groups, any one time, 75% of the students are listening or doing nothing. So I think teachers often see those as being speaking activities. But I think those are actually, or they should be, listening activities. Do you not find so often that students come to the front and present something and everyone else is bored or playing on their phones or they're preparing their own thing, and then it's frustrating for you and the teacher goes, hey, guys, stop it, listen, pay attention to this group. But they had no reason to listen.
Yeah, so I think they can practice their listening when the other students talking. Right?
So just doing something really simple, like giving them some questions. For example, if it was that advert, at the end of the advert, you got to tell them one reason you might buy their product or one reason you might not buy their product. Or if it's higher level students, then maybe you can say, I want you to give feedback on did they use the right intonation? Or
maybe they can choose the best performance or something. Like
and give 3 reasons why. Right. And then I think as soon as you do that, you turn it from being not a very good speaking activity into a really cool listening activity.
Yeah.
I think another one is like, if ever you do one of those things, tell your partner something, then you have to make sure that the partner has to do something with the information. For example, I saw a class the other day and the activity was speak to your partner and tell them how healthy or unhealthy you are and what you're going to do in future. But that's not enough, because then they're speaking and the other person has no reason to listen. So you have to give the other person a reason to respond. So either, for example, they have to take notes, so they're listening and then they're writing, and at the end you have to say, like how many people in the class are healthy or unhealthy, or maybe give a suggestion, I drink too much beer and I smoke too many cigarettes, so in future I'm going to go out less. And maybe the other person says, maybe as well you can join a gym and that will help. But because the person has to listen to the information, understand it, and then respond.
Okay.
So Tracy, what do you think when teachers are listening to this podcast? What are some of the listening skills that you think they're using?
Well, when they look at the title of the podcast and they can predict what the podcast is going to talk about.
Right, because if they're not, they think listening is a rubbish topic, they probably wouldn't open it.
And then maybe the first few minutes and they can get a general information about what we're talking about. For example, we have the 3 main points.
Maybe you're always listening for gist. And then I often find if I'm listening to a podcast and I hear something really interesting, I pause and I go back. And then that's when I listen for the really specific information. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
If you've got a question or a topic that you'd like us to discuss, send us an email or leave us a comment.
If you'd like to listen to more podcasts, please visit our website www.tefltraininginstitute.com.